Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Box to Box podcast, ready for the 21-22 football season. I'm your host, Dom, Villa fan, and with me is Kieran, Liverpool fan, and Joe, the Burnley fan. And we're just going to talk about the outbreak of the new season, what we're going to expect and what we're going to see, obviously specialising in our own clubs, and talking about transfers especially. Kieran, Liverpool have had an interesting window, and by interesting, I mean interestingly quiet. Obviously, Ibrahim Konate signing from Leipzig, but what have you made of Liverpool's business, and how do you rate their chances ahead of the new season?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think it's just magnificent that the season's nearly here. It's obviously we had a wonderful summer with England, but we're getting back into the the week in week out stuff. Yeah, but my point of view, yeah, it has been quiet. I'm a little bit disappointed. Obviously, the Canati sounds fantastic because well documented our problems at centre back last season. The amount of different players we had to play at centre back, so I'm glad we sorted that, but. Yeah, for me, I'd like to see definitely at least one or two coming before the end of the window. For me, I'll look ahead. If the African Cup of Nations goes ahead, two of our main players, Sadio Mane and Mo Salah, will obviously be going there. So where we've struggled is we've lacked depth into those situations if we've got injuries. So yeah, I'd like to see us definitely get one or two more in for the end of the window. Looking ahead to the season. Hopefully we can pick up where we left off a couple of seasons ago. I'd love to see us, be up there challenging for the title, challenging for the Champions League. But there's some fantastic teams there. Man City definitely were the favourites, and I think for me Chelsea are going to have a good season as well. Obviously European champions, so it's going to be hotly contested. But I'm just so excited that it's we're starting up again this weekend.
Yeah, it's brilliant to have the season back. Obviously, the heartbreak of the Euros, but it was a good heartbreak in the sense that we got all the way to the final, and to have that roller coaster. But you're talking about having 1 to 2 new signings. You've got youngsters like Harvey Elliott coming through, who's had a great season at Blackburn, and hopefully want to figure in your first team. But for a club operating on much more of a shoestring budget in comparison, Burnley, I mean, Joe, they've not really had any incomings, have they? So how do you assess the chances of the next season?
No, it's typical Burnley, really. We tend to do our business late if we do any. A lot of Burnley fans aren't very happy with the new regime and Alan Pace and his AOK team trying to commercially grow the club. But I like to be positive in my assessment on football and believe you've got to do that initially to generate the funds with a club like Burnley. Because if you get the situations right off the pitch in terms of advertising revenue and sponsorship deals, that brings about on the pitch results like with gems maybe from abroad that you could pick up, say for like 8.5 million. So really, although we've only really brought in Nathan Collins and Wayne Hennessy, I plead for patience with Burnley fans to say that these guys from AOK, this is a long-term project for them, and we've got the right manager at the helm in Sean Dyche. We're a bit like a Wigan or a Stoke or Burnley. We're often tipped to go down every season, and we often think it ourselves that we're going to go down, but somehow we managed to escape. But I do believe in order to keep Sean Dyche at our club in the long term, which AOK have said they want to give him a 10-year contract if they could, that's how much they like him. We do need to back him financially because the guy has pulled off miracles season upon season. We nearly qualified for Europe in the first COVID pandemic season towards the back end when we got a draw with Liverpool. Sorry, Kieran. I don't think it's going to go that way in a couple of weeks' time. But yeah, I have faith this season that Sean Dyche will pull us through, but he does need supporting from that sense.
Yeah, and it's difficult for a club like Burnley, I think, when their finances might be relatively limited, because it's difficult with the whole way that the financial pyramid works at the top of the Premier League. Because obviously you see City spending massively. I mean, even around the world, you see PSG spending massively. But I think it's interesting for me that the Premier League clubs have been able to spend so much more than their counterparts. In terms of Bayern Munich, in terms of Barcelona, who are cash strapped, even in terms of Real Madrid. The Premier League, because of England's own unique COVID situation, for some reason has just financially not benefited off, but has regressed by far less to an extent than the other European leagues have. And seeing the amount of spending that we're seeing into the Premier League with transfers like Jack Grealish to Manchester City for 100 million, a transfer which hurt me in the heart. You know, Sancho, Dortmund to United, Lukaku coming to Chelsea very soon. All these international transfers. I wanted to first get the perspective of you, Kieran, because obviously you support one of these big clubs. You support a club that is willing to spend and able to spend, because of the financial fair play rules, a huge amount of money on one or two players. So, how do you see that figuring as you know, a fan of your local team? Do you agree with the principle of being able to spend like that above other clubs, or do you think there's problems with the football financial pyramid in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, it would be a bit hypocritical for me to, you know, sort of, you know, have a go at these clubs for spending too much. When I look, you know, I look at my own club. We spent, you know, 75 million on a goalkeeper, Alisson, 75 million on Virgil van Dijk, you know, and all that. So it would be hypocritical. But, you know, even for me looking up, you know, even a club like Liverpool, we can't, you know, we can't actually match, you know, some of the spending power that these clubs have. Yeah. You know, I mean, 100 million. I mean, it's an extortionate figure, isn't it? You know, it's unbelievable. I mean, obviously, you have all this show of financial fair play. I mean, UEFA tried to go in for City a couple of years ago, didn't they? But that didn't get anywhere. They got offered a fine in the end. So to me, I see all this. I don't think financial. I don't even know what it. You know, sort of what it is. What you have to do to get banned from Europe.
Token gesture, really, isn't it? That it's just their way of pretending to say we're going to do something rather than actually doing anything about it. Like Calvé Solakol said on Sky Sports News today, like you said there, Kieran, PSG got challenged by UEFA and went to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, won the case, and nothing ever got said about it. And as a Burnley fan, besides the money and the financial stability it provides to our clubs, I don't actually like the Premier League. I think it's boring. They make it out like it's a really entertaining league. But for me, in these top leagues, the same like elitist group win the leagues every season, purely based on spending power and attraction, i.e. wages. For me, I'd like to see another like Leicester or maybe even Aston Villa win the league, you know, one time down the line by everybody having the same amount to spending, like a limit. I know that that's potentially not possible and it's wishful thinking as a fan, but I'd like to see everybody like get a fair crack at the whip by like signing an equal amount of quality players, but obviously that's not going to be possible.
Yeah, I think it's really difficult because I think it's sort of created a loop now, hasn't it? Because I think you look at Manchester City last season, they've won so much money from the trophies that they won. You know, PSG, the amount of prize winnings that they're winning it's like if you win that prize, you're entitled to spend that money. But the problem is, because you've got that much money in the first place to be able to win that prize, it sort of creates a loop where you can just, because you're going to win that prize because you've got the money to spend the most, it creates a really difficult loop. And I think, you know, Joe, I mean, me and you have both been fans of clubs. I mean, Liverpool have been in the Championship recently. I have recently, and you have as well, Burnley. And one thing that's been really staggering to me has been the financial disparity between the Premier League and the Championship over time.
Yeah.
But over time, and especially with COVID, I feel like that's only increased. And I wanted to get your thoughts as to how do you see the Championship managing financially in this time of post-COVID? Because the Premier League, they're fine. Grealish is moving for 100 million. Sancho, Lukaku, all these big transfers are happening. Varane, whatever. It's wages. The money in the Premier League is there and it's clear to see. But in the Championship, a lot of clubs aren't able to afford signings. And if they do, they have to be loans, or they have to be low wages, have to be instalments, all these things. So coming from a fan of like a club that's been around the lower leagues like myself, how would you sort of assess the Championship financial situation? What do you think of the league and how it can sort of handle its finances moving forward?
Well, I think, say, if we have another lockdown, for example, we could be in serious trouble in those situations. We see now not many players move on as much from these Premier League clubs who get relegated to the Championship. So that means they're on Premier League wages and not necessarily the clubs are getting the same amount of revenue. So, and half of the time, these lads are down tools because they don't want to play and they want to get a Premier League club. So half of the time, they're not even utilising that asset, or they're just training with the under-23s because they've done something to upset the manager. And Andy Holt of Accrington Stanley chairman, he's always on Twitter having a go at the EFL and certain types of parachute payments. He feels the system is all wrong, and I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I feel like we had a lesson to maybe learn from the COVID pandemic and how football clubs should be run, and the equal financial distribution. And obviously, it's not over yet with Tracy Crouch and a fan-led review, but I feel like it's perhaps a missed opportunity in these bigger clubs like Man City and PSG, although they're not in this country. They all have a effect on the pyramid, because a transfer window is a chain of events, if that makes sense. Or one signing affects another, because another club thinks, well, if they got 100 million, we can get 50 million for this player. You know what I mean? So I do think Championship's in trouble, and it needs to maybe look at its spending, say if we do have another lockdown or there is more implications due to COVID.
I think that's a really great point. I think the point about how COVID could be seen as an opportunity for improving the way that the EFL is run, the finances of the EFL is distributed, it's massive, because the EFL can be blamed for the collapse of Bolton, of Bury, who were in such dire financial straits. But if you listen to their fans, and all the fans of the EFL, I'll sit here and say now, the way that the EFL manages finances in those three divisions, the Championship, League One and League Two, is catastrophic. And even the progression from the Premier League to the Championship with a 150 million player final, it's not right. And at the other end, when you've got the relegation promotion from the National League, it's also not right. And I think it sort of raises a wider problem about football finance that we're talking about with these big transfers, but even talking about things like the European Super League and sort of the way that football is progressing can be quite worrisome to sort of the average football fan. And I think another one of these aspects, another thing about that is that we're talking about now is the digital ticketing. It's another aspect of football modernising and moving on. But we've seen in pre-season the problems that have arisen. I know, Kieran, you mentioned yourself before we went on air that there have been problems, but could you talk to everyone about sort of what is going wrong, what is going on with digital ticketing, and how is it causing a problem, and how bad has it been in your club's experience?
Yeah, so obviously they brought this in. Well, they actually brought this in last year. So I was very fortunate enough last December to go to Anfield during one of the games, because we were in. We were allowed to. I think it was us, Everton, Southampton, and I think Brighton with the other team. At one point, you were allowed to actually go to games. So I was fortunate enough to go to a game around Christmas last season. And so it was a completely new experience for me. Obviously, you download, you take it comes straight to your phone. You think, you do think how technology is, wonderful when you see something like that. But at that time, there was only 1,500 fans allowed in, so there was no issue with queues or that. You were getting in. But we've just had a couple of friendlies recently against Athletic Bilbao and Osasuna, where pretty much we're trying to get full stadiums in there, and obviously with COVID regulations and people who are not used to this system, everything's got to be check before you go in. There's people who've got multiple tickets on us. There's a lot of families who you speak about the price of football, who sadly can't go to league games because they're priced out the game, and it is a shame. So they go to the friendly games. And the main problem was, if you're getting, a family in there, say a family of four, the 4 tickets were going on the one phone. So that's where the problem was, going through each individual ticket. So for us, both of those home friendlies, I think the first one was delayed by half an hour, and the second game was delayed by 15 minutes, which, there was always going to be teething problems with, these new ideas and systems. So, whether they come back to us, obviously we're Liverpool away this first game, second game, as Joe said, we got home to Burnley. I just hope it's sorted by then, because it's one thing to have a friendly delayed by 15 minutes. It's another thing to have an actual league game delayed, because that that will properly spread around the world. So. It's just hopefully from our point of view, it is sorted. I mean, I think it may get a bit easier because obviously, mostly it'll be, friendlies are just, paper ticket sales that go around. For league games, we're going to have our, standard, I'll have my season ticket in. So hopefully that'll speed things up, and we don't see, like, from my point of view, the queues outside turnstiles and, delays to kickoffs.
Yeah, I think moving into the Premier League season, especially as opposed to pre-season, you sort of can't really afford to be taking these risks of like 20,000 people stood outside the stadium waiting to be let in because their phones had a problem or the device had a problem at the turnstile. And I think it's just really irritating and worrisome for football. And one thing that I will say is I think it sort of discriminates against an older generation who has sort of been going to the
Absolutely.
ground for so many
Yeah.
years, who might not have the same access to technology, who might have the same understanding of it. I think that makes it a lot more difficult for them. And I was just going to ask you about that, Joe. Really, do you think because of the potential discrimination that's going to happen as a consequence of this, do you think that paper tickets should be made an option? Because I mean, I do just want to hear what you thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm not massively into all this digital malarkey. Football is a very raw game and it should be kept that way. There's an argument, like, it's literally not broke, so don't fix it. You know what I mean? Like you said, there's some older generation fans who've been going on the stadium for 50 years. They probably don't have an iPhone because they've never had to have one. So why potentially pigeonhole them and cause them distress and anxiety when they're trying to probably speak to stewards who outside the ground who don't know how to help them because they haven't got a device like that on them. And it's just not necessary really. For me, it doesn't really have anything to do with COVID. Yes, I do believe the digital market can increase revenue like off the pitch in terms of business. But ticketing is different because it can be bought like by paper and you can make your money anyway. So for me, I think it's the Premier League who's doing this initiative, isn't it? It's obviously just the way of the world these days, and people can even buy portions of football clubs on apps. I think that's been tried before, and I think they should just leave these things alone. The human mind is a lot more productive than a computer for me, and we've been doing it for hundreds of years, buying tickets. So what's the point in changing now? But anyway, that's my view.
Yeah, I just like. Sorry, Dom. I know. With us, there are you can still get season ticket cards. So
Yeah.
if you could apply for them, I think you've got to have your photo on them now. So it's not. I don't think it's completely digital. So you can apply for the card, which works like the old season ticket card, and you scan in that way. But yeah, it is becoming too digital. I mean, I sit there with many stories, and my father, he shows me, old match tickets from back in the day, and you can see his face, reminiscing over those things. He's particularly proud of the 1984 European Cup final. He's still got the ticket that he had to go to Rome. So, I think you are going to lose that, the memories of actually having a ticket instead of, here's a phone with a ticket on.
Even
I agree
things like,
completely.
sorry, Dom, just to quickly jump in, even things like phones in stadiums, perhaps this is going a bit too far. Rather than like celebrating the moment of scoring the goal, we all naturally get our phones out to see if we can like have a picture with a player or a player being near us, or having photos with opposition managers. And I suppose football's changed in that way, in that regard. But for me, like, just leave certain things alone and just use our brains, because football originated in the parks, for example. We never knew what a phone was 100 years ago, but there you go.
I agree completely. I think the core of football is about going there. It's community, it's family, it's friends, and it's enjoying those moments together, those moments of highs and those moments of lows. That's what football's all about. And I think if you sort of spend that sort of life living behind a phone screen, and when football is monetizing those markets, I think it becomes dangerous. When it becomes all about the digital tickets as opposed to like, I mean, I keep paper tickets that I've had because I think when I'm older, I'll be able to tell my grandchildren that like when I was a kid, I was able to go to Villa v Burnley at home and we drew 2-2, and I was really annoyed. But like, and even like today, I want to mention this dead quickly. Villa announced a partnership with Socios, which is sort of like a digital sort of blockchain. Do you know what I mean? It was sort of like Football Index, which got done for scamming, and I was sort of there like, as a football fan, how do I sort of feel about the digital market? Because I'm all about the game being modernised, but in a way that's against fans, and that's a problem. And Kieran, as a fan of a club that was willing to join the ESL, How do you feel about modern football owners and their relationship with the fans, and what more should be done? Because I was annoyed today, and I want to see how you feel about things like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, you bring that up. I mean, it was an absolute disgrace, wasn't it? When obviously that news got announced, I was actually at that time embarrassed to be a supporter of my own club because it was pure greed. It's basically what it is. The owners of the big clubs are the only want to get. Sadly, football is only interested in one thing. Sadly, at the top, and it's money. And it's a real shame that the rich want to get richer. The 12 clubs wanted to go and play, and I thought, it completely goes against, for me, everything as a fan. It's just basically saying, it doesn't matter if we lose. I sat there when we played Leeds on the Monday night. I was just sat there going, well, if we're moving to Super League, this game doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So it's one. Why have we got a God-given right to play against other teams, and other teams can't. So it is sadly all about greed and all about money. I mean, from my point, I know it's hard to say because we do spend a lot of money, but I do think even us, clubs look at us and think they're massively rich. To us, we're looking up at PSG, Man City, Chelsea, going, we're never going to match your spending power. So even at the towards the very top, it's still split into So there was no reason why the European Super League, 50 years down the line, that could have split into another league. So it's sadly the case that like I say, it's all about money. It's all about greed. It needs to happen. We basically all the uproar. We saw where the power is with the fans, and how they actually got together, united, and all the clubs turned and went, look what they've done. We're gonna have to back out. And what was about a week and a half, the 6 clubs went, we don't want anything to do with this anymore. So
yeah,
that fan power is 100% there, and I think that's what's needed if we're gonna try and get away from this power, this greed. I think if we get all the fans, I do think there can be real change in the future. But for me, the owners of the clubs, I don't think this has gone away. I do think there'll be another scheme, another attempt at it. Because I know the Premier League are trying. They're gonna make the top 6 sign things to say no, you're not going. But I guarantee there'll be another scheme, another thing to try and lure clubs away.
Yeah,
I agree. I think the ESL isn't going away. You can see with Barca, their loyalty to the ESL through the Messi saga, the Real Madrid, Florentino Perez, the poster boy, and Juve with Agnelli. People like that, they're loyal to these football money-making schemes, and they suit the clubs at the top. And I'll give you an example. I want to see what you think about this, Joe, because I saw for a good year or two fans being like Manchester United fans especially. I'm going to call you out. They were all like, Grealish is signing for us. Grealish is our player. And then I look at someone like Dwight McNeil for Burnley, who I think is a brilliant player. And you see opposition fans being like, oh, he's going to sign for us. Why would he ever stay at Burnley? Why would he ever sign a contract extension? And talking about like the modernisation of football in the ESL, how much do you think attitudes towards sort of players and towards clubs need to change? Because it's all very well and good there being a bit of money spread around, but unless attitudes change, how much is the landscape of the league actually going to be affected?
Yeah, definitely, because Sean Dyche should have got a big club job by now as a manager, example, but unfortunately, faces don't fit. It's football snobbery, and because people have a different way of playing and it doesn't involve 150 passes before actually getting out of your own half, people don't think you're a good manager. But that man is one of the best managers in the league, but because he's outspoken on things like diving and he doesn't players wearing like silly headphones and stuff before games, or getting involved in like things outside of football, his face doesn't fit. And like you say with Dwight McNeil, why would he want to stay at Burnley? Well, why would he want to sit on the bench at Man United behind the likes of Sancho? You know, he's got over 150 games in his legs, I think, and he's the same age as me. He's 1 month younger than me. That's good. That's good at his age, and there's so many players like that, and that will stand England in good stead going forward. But yeah, there's a lot of snobbery, and you sort of feel like the Premier League and the top 4 clubs within it, or the top 6, it's like an elitist group, but you can't even class the likes of Arsenal and Tottenham in it because they're very mediocre sides who haven't won anything for like 7 years. But yet, because the owners have like the financial backing, yeah, they just think they deserve to be entitled to everything. I mean, I even heard a story in regards to the Super League. What came out, I think it was when Stan Kroenke first came to his Arsenal game, or like 3 or 4 games down the line.
Yes.
He had to ask somebody what colour Arsenal were playing in. I mean, it's a joke, but obviously. Go on, you okay?
I know. I remember hearing that his first Arsenal game, he had to ask someone what the offside rule was or something. Something like that.
To be fair, I didn't know that till about 11. It's a bit confusing, isn't it, really?
Yeah, but when you're an
Even more
you
so
spend
now.
Yeah, that's true with the VAR and that. But I think when you've bought a football club for a few billion quid, you should about have a vague idea of what offside is, and when the bloke on the line gets his flag out. But I was just going to move on because
Yeah.
I think moving on from the football mafia, we're talking about football in general now moving forward. And I think it's an interesting way to sort of talk about COVID as well, because we're talking about the COVID finances, but talking about the COVID on a different level, talking about vaccine and test proof. Obviously, there was reports that the Premier League and the British government, were going to make it compulsory to be double jabbed after the 31st of September, it might have been, or 30th of October, something like that, to be double jabbed to attend the game. And now they're debating that idea, and they're looking about vaccine passports. And I want to just ask Kieran, how do you think the Premier League, the clubs, and the government should account for fans next season? Should fans have to be single or double vaccinated? Should fans have to provide proof on arrival? How do you think it should work?
I mean, there's so much confusion around it all. I mean, personally, just on that note, I'd got my second jab today. Just in case, for me, just in case. Just from a personal level, for me, I just want to go to the game. I just want to see my team play. So I'm from my own personal view, I'm happy to subject myself to this. I mean, personally, for me, it's not a problem. But obviously there are people that don't wish to be vaccinated. They've got their own views, which they're very well entitled to. So it's it is a very confusing issue that I think there needs to be, certainly when they get together, have these talks, which are obviously ongoing now. There needs to be clarity in what they're doing. I mean, whether you're going to be single jabbed, double jabbed, negative flow tests or whatever. And I think I've read Chelsea are you need at least a negative test, I think, to get into their grounds. I think they're already implementing that. So for me, I think the legislation will come in at some point. I don't know when. You mentioned September, October, but I just hope whatever they do, I hope they get clarity. Personally, I'm happy to go through if they bring passports in. For me, that's absolutely fine. I've got my second jab. I'm happy to go through all that. So other people may have different issues, different points of view, which they're more than entitled to. So it is a difficult situation, which I think at the minute we can only just sit and wait to see what they actually come up with.
I agree. I think it's going to be sort of subjective on clubs as well, because as you say, like Chelsea sort of taking the initiative. I think clubs are going to sort of have to take their own decision and consult with their fans, because obviously, as you say, there are fans who might not want to have the vaccine, and then those fans might have season tickets and complicated issues like that. But moving on to the players now, Joe, obviously with the self-isolation rules changing over the course of the next couple of months, and you've seen, for example, Leon Bailey, who I cannot wait to see in an Aston Villa shirt, is currently self-isolating because of international travel. And if he was double jabbed, he wouldn't have to. And I don't know if he's had one jab yet and he's waiting for the second, or if he's choosing not to had the jab himself, but seeing football players, if they have 2 jabs, they're potentially available to avoid getting COVID. And I saw Villa last season that when they had a COVID outbreak, it really scuppered our season. But if they had the vaccines this time, things like that don't happen. It doesn't mess up the league and disrupt the league and disrupt matches in the way that it has. And it disrupts matches, it disrupts fans. So I wanted to see what you think. Do you think players have sort of a responsibility, Joe, to get the vaccine for the sake of themselves, their fellow professionals, and for the sake of their jobs and their industries for the fans? Or do you think they still have that sort of personal priority? And how do you think the government and the club should sort of work around that?
Well, yeah, they do have a responsibility in terms of portraying themselves in a good light to fans and, perhaps encouraging them to get it. But we sometimes look at footballers as non-human beings, and probably silently there's definitely a few footballers out there that probably have their own views on this matter, and I think it should be down to personal prerogative, but it would be beneficial, like you say, in terms of a club perspective. The players would be helping out that club. Say, for example, if it's a club star player, like, I don't know, Jack Grealish or, like you say, Leon Bailey, and he turned around to the club and said, I don't want to get a vaccine because I don't agree with it or whatever. He's just signed for that. They've just signed for that club. Well, what they're going to do now if they get the virus or have to isolate because one of their family members has tested positive for COVID? Let's have it right. This virus isn't going away. So these footballers and people in general society, unfortunately, if you want to live a normal life, you're going to have to get it because there's nothing that we can do about it because we're just everyday people and we don't make these decisions. So I think, like Kieran said, if you want to go to football, go to gigs or wherever, you should just have it regardless of your views and probably just keep your head down in these scenarios.
No, I'd agree. I think that for the sake of the safety of not only yourself but your own family, but also the spectators that you're going with, everyone that you interact with, if you get COVID, that's one thing. You can sort of, I've had COVID. I tested positive like a month or 2 ago, and it's not fun. But the fact that I can have the jab and then I'm protecting myself, but I'm protecting others. And imagine if you walk past someone and that person passes it on to someone else, and then you might be causing someone to go into hospital or something even worse. And I think for the sake of football, I think football fans can often sort of carry this bad reputation. I think a lot of it's classist, of football fans as being savages, all they want to do is fight, they want to do stupid things. And I think if football fans sort of said, well, no, we're going to get the vaccine, we'll be responsible, then I think that sort of dispels that sort of unfair stereotype. And I think another thing that fans could do to sort of dispel stereotypes like that is to stand up for causes and social causes that are important to society. And one of those, I think, for me, is the continuation of taking of the knee. Obviously, there are players out there, like I believe Ivan Toney, and maybe, I can't remember if it's Wilfried Zaha, I might be making that up. But I know that there are definitely football players out there who, will say, taking the knee is symbolic, it doesn't really mean anything in terms of, the anti-racism cause. Whereas in general, there's been an agreement to continue that. So, Kieran, what do you think about that sort of decision? What do you think about the potential fan response to that might be?
Well, I'd personally hope that it was I'd be a positive response. I mean, you look back at the Euros and the way the England team continued to take the knee. I mean, there was people who were saying before the tournament, they're going to continue to take the knee. They're going to be booed. The team's not going to get anywhere. But you saw, the real togetherness of the team. So for me personally, I hope they do continue carrying on. I think that there will be booing at every ground. I mean, I think every club's going to have those people that are going to boo. Hopefully they get drowned out by, the applause and the cheering, which for me, I'll be doing, especially when the knee's being taken. So yeah, for me, I do hope it continues. I mean, there's also, are things being done? Is enough being done? We're taking the knee every week, but realistically, are things being done? Are things improving? For me, no. I mean, I've talked about in the past. For me, we've seen all the racist abuse on social media sites, and I think that it's been absolutely disgusting the way the England players were treated after the final. So, I do agree with taking the knee. I will applaud and cheer, all teams, all players that do take the knee, but for me, a lot more needs to be done to combat, this problem that we do have.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'd just like to jump in there. I agree with Kieran. Stronger action needs to be taken for me, like boycotting future games, walking off the pitch, or permanently coming away from social media, maybe even points deductions. In a way as well, I'd like to make this point. I sort of feel like, obviously, it's right to talk about these issues, which is absolutely brilliant, and we're highlighting them. But in a way, we're sort of giving these people the airtime to do it more, because the amount that we're having to talk about it is like giving people the impetus to think, oh, if I do this or run on the pitch or hold up a banner or send something to somebody on Instagram, then I'm going to get on telly for it, because for some reason they think that kind of bad publicity is good, even though it isn't. But yeah, definitely stronger action needs to be taken in terms of, walking off the pitch or refusing to play future games or coming off social media completely, rather than just a one-day thing, like into a permanent strike until passports come in and things like that, because people need to be held accountable for these issues that they have, because they definitely would not say it in person, or the majority wouldn't anyway. They'd be like, "Hi Jack, nice to see you," for example, or "Hi Bukayo Saka, can I have a picture please?" But yet they could be the one racially abusing him online. But that's just my view anyway. Yeah.
No, I completely agree. I think the problem is as well is that because we were talking about earlier, to bring it back, sort of the digitisation of football and taking it into the online market, and the way that clubs use social media now is it's monetary, and the problem is clubs and players who have their own brands, and the way that social media is now is it's very monetized to be on social media through advertising, through brand deals, through all these things. Having social media is brilliant, but then when someone receives disgusting abuse like Bukayo Saka, Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho, especially received after the Euros final penalty shootout, it suddenly becomes a case of, well, you can't really come off social media because you're making money for the club by being on social media. Imagine Jadon Sancho's transfer announcement to United. That made United so much money. But in all realism, would Jadon Sancho really, if he had the option, have gone, I'd love to stay on social media because of all the messages and the comments that I get? And I think it's a real big problem, because, as you say, Kieran, there's not enough that's sort of being done, because it's all very well and good to take the knee, and I completely applaud that and I agree with that. I remember when I was watching, I think it was the second game of the year, I was at university in the JCR, and when the knee happened, like, people started clapping, and it was like, wow, that was really spontaneous and cool, and that's great. But what the problem is when you haven't got social media companies digging on the racist abuse, when there are still a disproportionate amount of black players and black managers who aren't getting the opportunities that they should do, especially lower down and working their way up the pyramid, it sort of becomes a massive problem that you have to look at. And, going ahead into the new season and going into what is, I think it's a landmark season for football, coming out of COVID, coming out of all of the racial abuse stuff. I mean, and the European Super League, obviously, how does the football landscape have to change for you? We'll start with you, Kieran, then you can come to Joe. What changes and how should it change over the time frame should be coming?
Yeah, totally right, man. Changes are definitely going to be made. I mean, if we keep with the knee issue, the social media issue, the social media companies, they have to do more. They've got to do more. They've got, there has to be a system where you sign up, you have to give personal information over. It's as simple as that, and we'll see how many people do that. If they continue to do it, there will be serious repercussions, and very quickly over time, it will the abuse will diminish completely. But no, I think you make a good point there. It is a big season, a massive season. First season back for we'll see full houses since March of 2020. So, there's obviously going to be lots of excitement, like everyone looking forward to it. But yeah, you think about all the things that have happened over, since then, Black Lives Matter, like you say, European Super League, we're talking about digitisation of football. you know, it's a lot. You know, a lot has happened. There's a lot of issues in football at the minute. When you think about it like that, but in terms, you know, changing landscape, like you say, I don't. In terms of you know, money in the game, I think we are honestly too far past it. I just think the game's gone that far. It's going to be very difficult to bring actually, you know, it back to, you know, a sort of a neutral fair amount. Because I do think the rich clubs are just too rich. You know, we've just gone past the point, you know, potential of no return. Because I do think it's gone that far. So, you know, it saddens me to say that, but I can't, you know, it's very difficult. Like I hope what I say, especially what happened with the Super League, the powers with the, you know, for me, I do believe the powers with the fans. You know, if we are going to get anything done at all, I think it's got to come through the fans. We've got to talk with the clubs. You know, we've got to have fan representation on boards. I'm fully behind that. On all boards, there has to be a certain percentage that, you know, are fan based. So hopefully, you know, I'm not being too much of a down, not being too downcast there. That we can get some of these issues which have, you know, been definitely made prominent. Hopefully, we can sort some of them out.
I think that's a really important point that you've made there. I know that you've sort of gone on this really beautiful sort of note about general football and where it wants to head, but Joe, do you have anything to add to that, or do you think Kieran sort of summed it up well? Any points?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with all the points Kieran's made there. There definitely needs to be action taken. But I think on a positive note, to end the podcast positively, I think it's an opportunity for us all as football fans to just be kinder to one another. You know, we've been away from football stadiums for 528 days when I go back on the turf on Saturday. And sometimes, for me, going on football, this might sound controversial, but it's not even about the result. It's just having that release to go with your friends and just have a good time, really. Especially on away games. Like, I love the feeling of going to another person's ground with another team's ground with your fans, and you know, just having a good time. So don't get too heads up on these issues of racism are really pointless when football's not about that. We've all played football. Even myself, I've played power chair football, which is like an indoor version of Demolition Derby. It's quite interesting. Check it out on YouTube. But yeah, football's for everybody really, and they do say it's the beautiful game if we're being cheesy. So I think it's an opportunity to allow these people to speak out on these issues, the footballers, so they don't return to being, you know, monotone and not speaking out on things that need to be said, and just being kinder to one another, really. I don't really bother about rivalries anymore, to be honest. Obviously, you do when you're on the ground, but I tend to let it wash over my head when I get home because football's about enjoyment, nothing else for me, really.
I agree. I think I mentioned the point earlier in the podcast. Football is about family, it's about friends, it's about community, and it's about fans. And I think with all the problems that football has, whether it's fans that need to step up by not committing the racial abuse that goes on, whether it's fans that need to step up by standing up to the oppressive owners that have led up to the ESL, and whether it's fans that need to step up by turning up in their droves to support their teams who've not had them behind them for so long because it's pandemic. I think it's time that as a football fan base and a football community, we sort of make that step up, we improve ourselves, and we improve the sake of the game, and we take measures to make sure that football gets into a better place over the coming years. And as much as we've talked about all the transfers and everything going to next season, I think it's a really nice way to end the podcast on that note. One of positivity, as you said, Joe. This is about fans having agency. This is about fans doing their own thing. And this is about fans making the game a better place. And I hope that the 21-22 season proves a prosperous one in that regard. It's on that note that I'm going to wrap up today's podcast. I've been your host, Dom Phillips. You can see my hat there, as well as Kieran and Joe have been fantastic.
Thanks, guys. Really.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much all for tuning in, and we'll see you again soon for another episode of Box to Box. But until then, bye-bye.